Our gospel for this first Sunday of Christmas comes to us from Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Now, after the Magi had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. Then what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. I would, however, like to invite the children forward. Thomas, Ellie. I realize we also forgot to light the Advent wreath. Let's quick do that. Thomas, grab the poker. Advent is fulfilled. Now, Ellie, just watch out. Make sure this thing doesn't hit you on the noggin. Advent is a season of preparation for Christmas. And it lasts 4 weeks. Those 4 weeks are done, each represented by one of the candles on the Advent wreath. Perhaps you might even have an Advent wreath at home. Certainly a nice tradition to have. And then when the whole wreath is filled, it is Christmas time. Thomas, come on, you can do it. Light the candle of Christ today. Okay. Oh, it's not too heavy. All right, guys. So, Merry Christmas again, Thomas, Ellie. Everybody. Did we travel for Christmas? Not really. Kind of, right? We had to drive to Westford, which isn't all that bad. Did any of you have to travel for Christmas? Anybody go far? Hands up if you did. Yeah. Okay, that is common. We sometimes have to do a little, because sometimes families go various places and you have to go. But it's kind of fun, actually, to travel for Christmas. Now, here's a totally separate question. Go travel for Christmas, that's right. Hello, online, Brad. Thank you for coming for Christmas. That was very nice. Now, did you know, or maybe a separate question, that's a fun travel? Have you ever actually had to go somewhere because it actually was something you had to do, maybe because you needed to escape or get away from danger?
Not danger, but in 2 months we're going to Grandpa Norma's 100th birthday.
Okay, yeah, but that's another fun reason. That's another good occasion, yeah. I'm guessing that not many people have. Raise your hand. We lived in Florida for a while, and every once in a while in Florida you have to evacuate hurricanes. So big hurricane comes through, and you got to run for your life. You got to pack up your car and go. You don't want to be like one of those guys who's the news helicopter finds you on the roof of your house, and you're saying, "I guess I should have left, huh? Shoot." So you know that Jesus actually also had to flee to Egypt. That's right. Yeah, if you're listening to the scripture, you just heard that. Thank you. You're very good, Thomas. Yes. So he almost, if the way that the scripture sounds, just moments after being born, he had to run away because of a really evil ruler named Herod, who we'll hear about more. But yeah, so Jesus is a person who knew from the very beginning what it was like to have to run away and be scared. His parents had already been through enough, in my opinion. So I'm sorry and sad to hear stories like that. But in many ways, I think it's good to know that Jesus was a person who went through all the same things that we might go through in life, including the scary things. In Home Alone, yes, another good Christmas movie. But I want you guys to know that if anything that happens in your life where you think this is a really scary thing, I want you to know that Jesus was there too, and Jesus promises to be with us. God Emmanuel, meaning with us, even in the scary and hard times. Okay? Yes. Real life is unfortunately like that. Can we sing our song? If anybody asks you who I am, who I am, who I am. If anybody asks you who I am, tell them I'm a child of God. Would you join me in prayer? O Lord, may the meditations of my heart and the words of my mouth be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. This Sunday is commonly called in the lectionary the murder of the innocents. And it's really kind of a bad timing. You know, we just had a really nice, uplifting church service on Wednesday evening. Christmas Eve is so filled with joy. And then the next thing you hear about is a pretty awful story, honestly. It's really grisly and kind of brutal. So I want to say this. Of all of the Bible stories and the historicity of them, the things that we know to have occurred with a high degree of certainty, this is one of the lowest. A quick note about how we do this sort of stuff. So the murder of the innocents, meaning Herod going out and killing all these babies because he thought that maybe they were Jesus, is a story that should have left behind other anecdotes, other records, and maybe even archaeological evidence of this kind of awful thing happening. And we just don't have that. Along with other things in the Bible, we like to try to buttress up our claims about what the Bible says and what happened and what Christ's life was like and what sort of things we can trust in by having other sources that also confirm, yes, that also happened. And we just, like I say, don't have it in this case. If you're interested in this, a lot of this is what we call church apologetics, which is not how to make good apologies, although I can teach you how to apologize if you need me to teach you how to apologize. You begin by taking responsibility, then you say sorry, and then you promise to do better. And that's what confession and forgiveness is. But apologetics is different. Apologetics is trying to prove the claims that we hold together and making sure that if ever you get in an argument with somebody, you have some good evidence. Church apologetics rests on the idea of an adversarial relationship in that sense, meaning we actually want to be able to make our claims over and against the refutations, the chance that somebody might have a counter-argument or counter-evidence to them, which is why some of the best claims in Christianity, some of the best ones that we want to buttress with, are actually the early opponents of Christianity. So what we would like to do is to take people who didn't like Christianity in particularly the 1st and 2nd centuries and see what it is they're saying about Christianity in order to see what truth claims are true. So especially if the people who don't like Christianity will at least admit that that happened, that's a good sign, right? Those are the people who would stand to benefit the most if they refuted those things. This is a long excursus, but I promise this is good. Some of the things that the early opponents of Christianity did take for granted and would agree did happen are, number one, the life of Christ, which might seem small, but indeed, the fact that we've got other sources, Roman sources, that will indeed say, yes, Jesus was a human being who lived in the Roman Empire. The second thing is the death of Christ. So it is also recorded by people who weren't Christians, that didn't like Christianity, that indeed he was put to death. And interestingly, the third thing is the resurrection of Christ. Most early opponents of Christianity actually ceded the point, would agree, yes, indeed, he was resurrected from the dead. It does appear that the witnesses reported that and that that happened. And a fourth thing, which is very germane at Christmas time, is the virgin birth. Now, later people, probably centuries after, 100 years or more, will come up with a story that says, no, Mary was indeed, there was a Roman soldier involved and whatever. Those sources are really late. It seems that virgin birth was something that was kind of taken for granted. Yeah, that was interesting that happened, kind of thing. Now, why I say all this is to say, so you can have in your hearts at Christmas time lots of questions about, yeah, but did it really go down like that? I mean, there's so much fantastical things that happen at Christmas. We've got dreams. Actually, count the number of dreams that Joseph has. He's got the dream to marry Mary. We've got the dream to run away, the dream to come back, dreams upon dreams. Then we got angels on top of dreams that are happening. I've never seen an angel, I don't think, so that would be something I would excuse you for saying that's fairly fantastical. We've got shepherds, kings. There's just a whole host of stuff that it almost makes you think when you're reading through this portion of the Bible. It reminds me more of like a Genesis in the Old Testament, right? It feels more like almost like a folkloric section, whereas as we get moving in our Gospels, it feels far more historical, right? It feels far more like these are recorded sayings of Jesus. These are events that have some historical record to them. Now, here's my second guess. When I told you just now that perhaps the murder of the innocents by Herod did not happen, that perhaps maybe this was something that we can't for sure say happened with the same degree of confidence, I doubt that many of you were all that relieved, right? Of all the grisly, awful Bible stories, this is the one that on some level it's like, well, that could have happened, and I honestly think that maybe it did. Maybe it did and maybe it didn't, but I don't feel any better knowing that it didn't. Why is that? Why is it that this is actually a story maybe we are comfortable with? I would posit it's a story that we're comfortable keeping is because it really resonates with the world that we're in. It resonates in a way that says, yeah, I know about rulers who pretend to be stronger than they are and who do acts of barbarity because they want to stay in power. Actually, that's fairly archetypal, isn't it? I know about how people who are the smallest and the most vulnerable are the ones who suffer the greatest. Doesn't that resonate too with the world we live in? I know about grieving mothers who are forced to put up with more than they should have to bear, the loss of a child. I know of it for a couple of reasons, because I, like you, watch the news. I know about it because I, like you, have read the Old Testament and know that these are stories that have happened before. In many ways, it might seem archetypal because perhaps that's exactly what the story is doing. It might be that the story is recounting the story of slavery in Egypt, in which all the Hebrew children were, again, in danger of extermination. And Moses, as the child who survived that, is somehow an echo here of Jesus, the child who survives, the child who lives amid that darkness and keeps hope alive. It could be that stories of guys like Pharaoh and guys like Herod are just kind of biblical stories, warnings for us against the tyrant, against the way that the world would ask us to believe in the strength of men like that, when in fact the Bible tells us that they are not nearly so strong as they would appear to be, and their death dealing has no power. God has that power. God has the power over life as well, and life eternal. So, on Christmas Eve, I preached a sermon here that was about peace, but definitely a sermon that recognized the darkness, recognized the fact that peace can often seem far off and maybe even so distant that it looks like it's from a fantasy. That this world, when it promises peace, even, it comes with a tinge of violence. That even the peace that we have here is the peace of dominion and domination. And it was, a sermon that carried a lot of those heavy undertones. And so I went home that night and we unwrapped a few presents and had a glass of wine. And as usual, as pastors like to do, they like to hear feedback from their families about sermons. And so I asked Kara, I said, that wasn't, too dour of a sermon on Christmas Eve, was it? And her eyes lit up because she had wanted to probably say yes to that before. Probably thought, that was an awfully dark sermon for Christmas Eve. There's a pattern to Lutheran preaching, if you've ever seen or felt this before. Sometimes they call it law gospel, and it's a movement, is what it really is it takes you down to the very bottom of things, to the absolute depths of where life is, of truth, of just plain, honest, brutal truth. And we look at things the way they are. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I don't want to give you a little bit less than the real, honest truth of things, because then when the second part happens, when I tell you the good news, I want it to have lifted us from the depths, from the very bottom of things to the very heights. And in my experience as a preacher now, doing this for 14, 16 years, something like that, I think the pastors often worry that the part of their sermon that's going to be the worst received is that part where we really just lay it all out there and we really just talk about how bad things are. We think that, oh man, people aren't going to like that part. But my experience has actually been the opposite. My experience is that when we are really truthful about the human condition, about the brokenness of this world, about the things that we've seen in our lives, with real transparency, including if we can make them about ourselves and say, I know what it is to sin, and I know what it is to be broken, and I know what it is to grieve, and I know what it is to mourn and see others mourning and have no words to console, the way that Rachel weeps for her lost children. To know that and to say that is something that actually goes over pretty well. And I think it goes over well because it lands in others' lives as well. Maybe and perhaps the hardest job of preaching is that uplift. To say, I've been there before, but I want to tell you now the good news. The good news that is found in Jesus Christ, because it is of a kind that is different entirely than our daily lives. It's of a different entire category. Jesus' ministry and life is kind of predicated around that. He's trying to get us, because we're so stuck in the mud, he's trying to get us to change our perspective entirely, to see what, in fact, a grace-filled life might look like. And indeed, a world that is completely redone in the image of goodness. That is really difficult for us to wrap our heads around. Yeah, Herod is an archetype. Herod's going to die, though. And Herod and people like him are all around us. That I will acknowledge entirely. And suffering is all around us, too. The harder thing to see, but I promise you it's there, is the little signs of hope, the little signs of promise that God is at work in the world, that hope has escaped to Egypt and is coming back to us, that even in the midst of a manger, a child is born, for whom the promise will continue. And in a kind of funny way, Herod proves this point. And he does it by an act of jealousy, an act of fear. He's fearful for his reign, for his rule, for his skin, for his family. Herod is one of these guys who really does operate out of that lowest common denominator kind of place. But what does he do? What does his act actually signify, his act of murder? Well, he proves that what he's afraid of is the good news. And the good news is that any one of those children, any one of those 2-year and younger infants, they might in fact be capable of doing what he does, of ruling in his stead, of being the one to reign. His very terror proves to us our power. It proves to us that through Christ, we, indeed all of us here today, are given the mantle, the responsibility, and the possibility that we too might be called kings. The Bible will go farther and say not only kings, but also priest and prophet. All of the power that Christ has been given, his entire life and ministry and death, was given so that you might have that as well, including the most powerful thing that he has of all, which is his relationship within God himself. Friends, it is because of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, it is because of the world, the way that it was found, and the way that it will be, that Christ came and gave this to us. And today what I have to give to you is the good news. You are called children of God. And it is in this promise that hope lives on. Amen.